welcome to a new series I've got going. It's called Time Travel Theory. I am Matthew Salzer. So, time travel in sci-fi is a rather interesting concept. It started originally with, I believe the first one was The Time Machine by Jules Verne. And from there it's gone on, and there's actually some theory, Albert Einstein actually brought up that time travel might actually be possible. But as of right now it is not, so it is exclusively a science fiction idea, and for all we know it might never be possible, because you think about stuff like the fact that we have never seen any actual time travelers. There's been hints, but there's been nothing explicit. Either way, I'll be using this little whiteboard to illustrate my points. In science fiction, one of two theories happens when it comes to the presentation of time travel. A, most common, most of them have this, you have what I refer to as the single timeline theory. That basically means that from point A to point B, there's one timeline, and if you jump from point A to point B, you are basically going on that same timeline, and likewise, but when you go into the past, you have the possibility of creating another timeline because of whatever you may do in terms of an actual action. It's what's called the butterfly effect. One action can create a whole bunch of other problems in the future. So that's the main issue when it comes to time travel, is the fact that you're dealing with multiple factors in here, and one mess up along the timeline can mess it up big time. Examples of this type of theory include Back to the Future, the Bill and Ted series, Time Cop, basically any one where, as I said, you have one timeline. Any disturbance along there can create an alternate timeline. However, you also have what's called a paradox. Now, a paradox can be explained by several ways. There's the grandfather paradox. So in the grandfather paradox, you have basically a time travel situation where grandson interacts with granddad. This interaction basically keeps grandson from meeting grandmother, and thus grandson doesn't exist, but at the same time, it was the grandson who interacted with the grandfather in order to stop the grandson from happening. So it's this big old twisted thing, basically, that is kind of mind-blowing, and again, I'm not sure I'd ever want to be in that situation. Another paradox would be the whole idea of interacting with oneself. For example, the time traveler travels back in time, interacts with the past self, and they are interacting. You're literally interacting with yourself. Another paradox. Now, there's dozens of these paradox situations in there. For example, Marty interacting with his dad, which would be a variation of the grandfather paradox. There's actually an example in X-Men where I can't remember who exactly it was, but basically one of Xavier's sons, because he's got multiple sons depending on the timeline, I think kills him, and as a result doesn't exist. So again, paradox. Then you have what's called the multiple realities theory. Now in this theory you have two different timelines going on, and so in this theory what happens when you time travel is you're not going along the same timeline. By time traveling, you are actually going to another timeline, and really what's happening is you're leaving that timeline, going to another timeline that you've created. And that means that this timeline exists, but you cannot go back to it. You're stuck in this timeline. What that means is any interaction with people is not going to affect your timeline. You're just going to create an alternate future that, again, you're not going to go back to, but it's not going to put you out of existence because, again, you're from this timeline. Whereas anything you do in this timeline is not going to affect your existence because you're already from this timeline. Again, kind of mind-boggling. Example of this includes the Terminator franchise, and also recently Endgame, which again, that's another one of those alternate reality scenarios. They exist in their own timeline. It's just that by going back in time, they are jumping to another reality and creating another reality by removing the stones in order to revive everybody. So again, kind of mind-boggling. An interesting franchise that actually includes both depending on the situation is the Star Trek franchise, where they have both the single timeline and the multiple reality timeline depending on the situation. We'll get into specifics about that later. So yeah, that's it. Hope you like this. This is both my Twitter and my Instagram. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe on the video as well. Also comment on what you want to see done in this channel, on this new series as well, because I'd really like to know. I've got a few planned, but after that I'm very wide open on what all to do. Again, this is my experimenting with this channel. Thank you very much. See you next time. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Time Travel Theory with Matthew Salzer, that is me. And today we are going to be reviewing the time travel of the Back to the Future franchise. One of the most well-known and definitely classic when it comes to sci-fi and definitely time travel, and I think nostalgia as well. So as I've mentioned in the previous video, Back to the Future holds to what I refer to as the single timeline theory. That is basically that there's one timeline in the Back to the Future franchise, and basically anything you do along this timeline affects the timeline, and it can be rather disastrous if you're not careful. So in the original timeline, in the old 1985 timeline, what happened was George McFly was basically peeping Tom on Lorraine, who would eventually become Lorraine McFly. They fell in love, got married, and because George never stood up to Biff Tannen, the local bully, he ended up being bullied for the rest of his life. And they kind of didn't have the best of marriages, but then again, they also didn't have the work either. So therein comes Marty, who seems to be the most adjusted, the most ambitious, and basically the most normal of the whole McFly family. Long story short, Marty meets Dr. Emmett Brown, who develops the time machine, and what happens is, through pure accident, because of a sequence of circumstances, Marty jumps back to 1955, creating, as I mentioned in the previous video, a paradox when he interacts with his dad, stops him from getting hit by the car from his future father-in-law, and thus, instead of Lorraine developing the crush on George, she develops the crush on Marty. Again, paradox, because mom and son are interacting. Ultimately, they're able to reintroduce George and Lorraine, and what happens is that creates an alternate timeline wherein they have a different relationship. This is what I refer to as New 1985. This is where Back to the Future 1 ends, Back to the Future 2 begins. So then what happens is Marty, Jennifer, and Doc all jump from 1985 to 2005 in order to stop Marty Jr. from basically making a mistake. They're able to do that. Unfortunately, older Biff jumps all the way back to 1955 and gives him the sports almanac. Again, we're talking about multiple paradoxes here. So what does that create? Well, that creates what's referred to as the alternate timeline, Hell Valley, whatever you want to call it, 1985A. Basically, Biff is, mad with power. He at some point offs George in between 1955 and 1985. It's a mess. Long story short, Doc and Marty have to jump all the way back from alternate 1985 and back to regular 1955, which is the only consistent part in both the old, new, and A timelines, and basically correct that by destroying the almanac. They do that, and they're able to restore the timeline. Unfortunately, Doc gets hit by lightning, and he jumps all the way back to 1885. This results in yet another timeline, because automatically jumping all the way back to 1885 creates yet another timeline. We can call this the newer timeline, in which basically all the stuff of Marty's jump back, Doc's brown back, everything interacting in 1885 creates this new alternate timeline in which things are again different, but they are satisfied with that, and eventually they're able to jump back to 1985, and that's where Back to the Future 3 ends. Fortunately, this movie has remained a trilogy, and they're probably not going to change anytime soon, because Robert Zemeckis has said that he likes the trilogy the way it is, and he also doesn't want to reboot. So until Robert Zemeckis dies, no more Back to the Future, which is probably for the best. We don't want that franchise. So yeah, that's Back to the Future time travel in a nutshell. I know, again, it was a little confusing, but that's just how it is. Of course, time travel is confusing in general because, again, paradoxes. Again, here's my Twitter and my Instagram. Like, share, and subscribe if you liked it. Again, maybe pop suggestions on what you want to see in terms of the time travel. There's obviously a lot of franchises that we can get to. Thank you very much. See you next time. Hello! Welcome to another edition of the Time Travel Theory with me, Matthew Salzer. This is, of course, my current series. This will be the last one before I take a break for something I'm planning for Halloween, and then after that we'll come back to it on the other side of October. So for today I'm going to go over the recently released, well, not recently released, but released this year, Avengers Endgame, because this involves a lot of complicated time travel, so be prepared to have your minds blown. So as I mentioned in previous videos, there's one of two ways in which you time travel in science fiction. You either have one timeline in which you go from the same timeline to another point and you literally affect the timeline, or you have the alternate timeline theory where when you take a jump, you're not jumping from one timeline to the other, you are jumping from your own timeline to another timeline, and this one's going to remain unaffected, keeps going, whereas you create another one by going there. That is what happens for the most part in the MCU, with the exception of the fact of when you start using the time stone, in which case it's the single timeline theory. So, that being said, here we go. So in Avengers Endgame, what they do is they use the quantum realm and basically are able to jump to alternate dimensions in order to retrieve the time stones, which Thanos destroyed in the beginning of it in order to prevent the snap from being reversed. So, in order to do that, the Avengers figured out how to jump back, but they needed to pick their targets because without Hank Pym, you had no Pym particles. So they only had the round trip one way back, unless they came up with something clever. So what originally happened was you had the team of Hulk, Captain America Steve Rogers, Iron Man Tony Stark, and Scott Lang Ant-Man go to 2012 to pick up 3 of the stones. You had Rocket and Thor go to 2013 to pick up 1 of the stones, and then you had the final 4, Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, Clint Barton, Hawkeye, Nebula, and James Rhodes, War Machine. However, there was a little bit of a screw up when trying to get the Tesseract, and as a result, Tony made up a final last-second goal to go to 1970, where he knew the Tesseract would be, to SHIELD headquarters and steal it from essentially his dad and get more particles from Hank Pym. Now, in theory, everything was fine and dandy except for the fact that 2014 Thanos got wind of it and was able to capitalize on that. Come to 2023, and basically there was a large battle after the snap had happened. So, however, then it gets even more complicated when all of this was erased, and Steve Rogers, rather than just coming back home, decided to make one more trip to live out an alternate timeline in which he gets to spend the rest of his life essentially with Peggy Carter, the woman who he never actually got to spend time with and who was essentially the love of his life. But then he comes back from that alternate timeline, but still you have that alternate timeline. And then also there's the fact that Loki took off with the Tesseract in the alternate timeline they created, so yeah, we got a bunch of alternate timelines going on here in the MCU. We'll just have to see how that all goes. So that's it. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you like this video, but be sure to comment down below. Be sure to check out my Twitter and Instagram down below, and let me know what you think, and if you want to see some other types of videos, maybe even a specific type of time travel video, and I will see you next time. Bye! Hello, welcome to Time Travel Theory with me, your host, Matthew Salzer. So, I hope you enjoyed my Halloween series that I had going on there. Lost Tapes is a favorite of mine, as cheesy as it may be, and yeah, it is what it is. But anyways, so as this is Terminator Dark Fate's opening day, I thought I would go into this. And by the way, full disclosure, this is not a paid advertisement. I'm just a fan of the series. So as I mentioned in several of these videos before, there are two types of time travel in sci-fi. There's the single timeline travel where you go from point A to point B on one timeline and you're literally going to affect everything going on there. And then you have the alternate dimension theory, where basically you travel from one timeline to another and you create an alternate dimension. That is what we're dealing with here with the Terminator franchise. Now, long story short, specifically here, we have what's called the Judgment Day scenario, basically in 1997. You have Skynet go there is an attempt to shut it off. Skynet retaliates by basically throwing all their missiles at what is in the original timeline. I know this was probably not thought out, but in the original timeline, the nukes were sent to their Soviet targets in 1997, which means in this original alternate timeline, the Soviet Union still existed. Not the case in our modern timeline, however. As I mentioned, this was probably an oversight, but at the same time, we can consider it an alternate timeline. Now, what happens in Terminator is that Kyle Reese is sent back to 1984 in pursuit of the T-800 Terminator portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger in order to protect Sarah Connor, who is the mother of John Connor. But then in the whole grandfather paradox theory, where again you interact with yourself or a relative in the past, Kyle Reese is the one who helps Sarah Connor conceive John Connor. And then also the chip and parts that were used in constructing the T-800 Terminator are used to create Skynet. It's this big old loop here. Now that happens in this timeline, and then as I said, it creates John Connor, blah blah blah, and then you have to jump all the way back. The timeline repeats itself. Except that it doesn't. How? Welcome to the confusing mess that is the Terminator franchise. So long story short, here's Terminator 1, where the T-800 goes back to assassinate Sarah Connor, Kyle Reese comes back, stops it, and the two end up conceiving both John Connor and Skynet. Here's T2, where another jump, this time with the T-800 for the Resistance. Also, there's a Resistance called TechCom, which fights off Skynet, and in 2029 is actually able to defeat them. That's the whole point of this going on here, is that humanity finally wins, and in order to try to prevent that and ensure their victory, Skynet and the Terminators jump back. But then in order to try to ensure that that victory actually happens, they do another jump, this time to 1995, where the T-800 is sent back to protect John Connor, and the T-1000 is sent back to assassinate him. That whole timeline ends up stopping Judgment Day, at least with 1997 anyways, because they destroy the Cyberdyne Systems headquarters where everything takes place. So Terminator 2 creates these three different timelines that essentially nullify the original timeline here. First of these deviations is the Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines and Terminator Salvation franchise, wherein Judgment Day still takes place in 2004, and a Terminator sent back from 2032 instead to protect John Connor and his wife. That goes into Terminator Salvation, wherein there's actually no time travel, it's just the future. Then there's also the Sarah Connor Chronicles, the TV show, which has multiple different timelines going there because there's multiple time travel jumps, and because there's no predestination paradox, there is multiple jumps happening and multiple events happening at once. Thus, there's no predetermination going on there. But then you also have the upcoming Terminator movie coming out today, Dark Fate. In this case, another T-800 was sent back to assassinate John Connor. Of course, because I haven't seen the movie, I do not know all the details. But you also have the Rev 9, which is like the TX, which has a hard metal skeleton along with the liquid metal outside, except these are two different units, unlike the TX, which is just one unit. But then in 2017, you had Terminator Genesis, which actually went all the way back before 1984, in which a T-1000 was sent to assassinate her as a child, and again a T-800 was sent back to protect her. Again, very confusing, I know, but that's the Terminator franchise for you. Thank you very much. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Let me know about in the comments down below. Let me know if you want to see more dark tape stuff, or if you want to consider seeing, should be my Twitter and my Instagram, and right around my face, as the current algorithm goes, is probably where you're going to be seeing a few different links for videos in my channel. So yeah, be sure to do everything that I've requested. See. Bye! Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Time Travel Theory with me, Matthew Salzer, your host. So this week we are going over the concept of time travel within the Star Wars franchise. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait, Matthew, what are you talking about? There's no time travel in Star Wars. There is, just not in the movies. So for anyone who watches Star Wars Rebels, there is, or was, an episode in which there was actually time travel. There was this area called World Between Worlds, and there were multiple different time portals, essentially, in an old Jedi temple. Now, obviously, you'd have to go and watch it, but long story short, this follows a linear concept where you are literally affecting the single timeline when you time travel. But essentially, Ezra didn't even fully travel in time. He literally put his hand through time and pulled Ahsoka back, stopping her from being killed from Darth Vader, which is ironic because Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, apprentice, master. There was also the brief consideration of possibly rescuing Janin from sacrificing himself. The only problem was that would cause a paradox, because then Janin, by sacrificing himself, wouldn't be able to save Ezra. So they go through everything. Any paradoxes are averted, Ahsoka is saved, and yeah, that's basically all time travel in Star Wars. It was within the whole Rebel series, and depending on how you look at it, that may be canon, that may not be canon. According to Disney, it's within their Disney canon, but, well, that's how it goes. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below what you might want to see next, what sodas you may want to see next, whatever. Or try to put it up and I'll try to get to it. If you cannot see my Twitter and Instagram tag, I will put it at the bottom. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.